All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sophia Rojenko, and I'll be your moderator today. On behalf of CCI Toronto and Area, we are proud to present today's webinar, Fire Code Updates and Changes to the Ontario Fire Code. Before we get started, just a quick housekeeping item. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the Q&A or chat feature. We'll address questions towards the end of the session, time permitting. Today's session focuses on the updated Ontario Fire Code, which came into effect on January 1st. This update includes significant harmonization with the national model codes, as well as Ontario-specific changes that affect residential occupancies. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker. District Chief Harry Chalikian is the District Chief of Professional Development and Community Risk Reduction Division at Toronto Fire Services. With over 20 years of experience in the fire protection field, he is highly knowledgeable in building and fire codes, as well as fire and life safety systems. We thank him for taking the time to join us today and for sharing his expertise with us. Chief Chalikian, I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So we'll get started. You should be seeing the title slide, Overview of Changes to the Ontario Fire Code, OREG 87/25. So OREG 87/25 is the amending regulation that has amended the Ontario Fire Code. So this fire code came into effect as of January 1st of this year. So the topics we'll be covering: harmonization, dwelling units for childcare, encapsulated mass timber construction, furniture in the corridors and lobbies, checking and testing of egress doors, carbon monoxide alarms, inspection of exit signs, integrated fire protection and life safety systems, dangerous goods, fire safety planning, Part 4 flammable and combustible liquids, demolition, testing of smoke control systems, and retrofit. So it's a lot of content we'll be going over. It's not going to be every single change that took place in the fire code. This is more geared towards residential occupancies, and we'll leave time at the end for questions you might have. So the types of changes that we're going to be covering: harmonizing, changing technical requirements of the Ontario Fire Code with the National Fire Code; unique changes, that's changes in the Ontario Fire Code that are not in the National Fire Code; editorial, consequential, and administrative changes, that's correcting oversights and errors from previous editions of the Fire Code, like altering definitions, bolding defined terms. Consequential changes would be things like one thing was changed and that had a downstream effect on other fire code provisions that then also had to be changed. And then there's quite a bit of administrative changes. That's things like renumbering of code provisions and copying and pasting certain requirements to other areas of the fire code for the purpose of harmonizing. And with this fire code, we also introduced the first fully French language edition. So starting with harmonization, the 2024 Ontario Building Code and 2026 Ontario Fire Code move towards harmonizing with the national model codes. Harmonizing reduces barriers to trade, product manufacturing, design, and maintenance. So harmonizing is primarily the responsibility and the product of the Canadian Board for Harmonized Construction Codes. They fall within the National Research Council of Canada. So they put forth all the model codes that are then adopted by all the respective provinces and territories. So with harmonization, they're pretty much eliminating all unnecessary inconsistencies from coast to coast. So anything that didn't need to be different from the national codes is now not different, so it matches more closely. But we also consider the unique needs of each individual province and territory. So in Ontario, what are some things that would be unique that Ontario would need in our building and fire codes that other areas would be different? Things like seismic activity, snow loads, building stock, when buildings were built, etc. So harmonization includes new additions to the Ontario codes from the national codes. So there was a lot of things in previous editions of the National Fire Code that was simply not put in the Ontario Fire Code, and there was no purpose for that. So that's been addressed, and we'll go over some of those specific changes. And reorganizing the Ontario codes to match the national codes. So first change in the definitions, this is one of the more significant changes overall, is in the definitions, the definition of dangerous goods has been amended. So dangerous goods means products, materials, or substances that are regulated by the Transportation of Dangerous Goods regulations made under the Transportation of Dangerous Goods Act Canada. And B, that's a new addition is the highlighted portion, classified as hazardous products under the Hazardous Products Act regulations made under the Hazardous Products Act Canada. So there's a significant emphasis on dangerous goods in this edition of the Ontario Fire Code. That is one of the harmonizing changes. So dangerous goods was always heavily regulated in the national fire codes, and we could always regulate it in Ontario, but using a Clause F inspection order citing the national fire code. So now that inconsistency, it was unnecessary, that's been resolved. So dangerous goods is now heavily emphasized in our fire codes, and we'll go over some of the ways that that would apply to residential occupancies. Next change, dwelling units for childcare. So new Division B 2113 bracket 4, childcare can take place in a dwelling unit with no additional provisions provided compliance with Section 6 bracket 3 of the Childcare and Early Years Act. So with this change, this is right in the fire code. So it's explicit that if a childcare facility taking place within a dwelling unit falls within that requirement, 6.3, which is exceptions to licensing, then the fire code can handle this like any regular single family dwelling unit. So it's something to keep your eye out for those managing residential facilities, that where do you draw the line for childcare facilities that's running in a dwelling unit, like an apartment building? So in scrutinizing 6.3, if there's a fully unlicensed childcare facility running out of a dwelling unit, you don't want to see any more than 5 children being cared for. So that's the maximum for fully unlicensed is 5, 3 of which is the max for being under the age of 2, and obviously at least 1 caregiver. As soon as you hit number 6, the ratio of 1 to 6 is acceptable, but you need an agency oversight. And beyond that, if there is actually a formally run childcare facility that's under the guidance of an agency, then we're looking at licensing requirements. So yeah, keep your eye out for that. No more than 5 for fully unlicensed. If in doubt, you can contact us, or if you find a problem, send a referral to the Ministry of Education and they will follow up. Next, we talk about encapsulated mass timber construction. So a very significant change in our building and fire codes. So this is a change in both building and fire codes. What is it? This is the definition. Encapsulated mass timber construction means that type of construction in which a degree of fire safety is attained by the use of encapsulated mass timber elements with an encapsulation rating and minimum dimensions for structural members and other building assemblies. So why this is so significant is that with mass timber construction, you can build a wooden building much taller than in previous editions of the building code. Very significant because many of these are already going up. And so in previous editions of the fire code, before 2012, you could only go up 4 stories that was made out of wood. And with the 2012, you're allowed to go up 6 stories. And now you can go much higher than that. And we'll get into some of the details as well. And so this is a new type of construction altogether. Most buildings are either combustible or non-combustible. And heavy timber construction was a subcategory of combustible. So encapsulated mass timber construction is similar to heavy timber, except the wooden members are larger. And the encapsulation is the fact that they are coated with drywall. So if you look at the pictures at the bottom, so where my laser pointer is, you should be seeing wooden columns. So that's unencapsulated mass timber construction. So it's being constructed. It's not encapsulated yet. So it's exposed wood. And this middle picture here shows once it's encapsulated. The encapsulation is pretty much drywall and variations of drywall. That's where it gets its fire resistance rating. And so this is what you want to see. And on the right here, it's showing the inside of the University of Toronto's new academic tower, which we'll show you the full picture of it later. And you'll notice that there are exposed elements. This is something that's noteworthy because the building code in some cases allows up to 35% of the interior of a compartment to still remain exposed wood. And so from a management perspective, you have to make sure that that encapsulation is there as per what was originally commissioned and approved by the building division. And so here's the outside of the University of Toronto's new academic tower. So it's going up downtown. Like I mentioned, there are several of these buildings going up. So the change in the fire code. Damaged or removed encapsulation materials shall be repaired or replaced in conformance with the building code so that the required encapsulation rating is restored. So that drywall is very important. It has to stay as it was approved because it's protecting these structural components. So this obviously is being done because it can be done safely. So something to put everybody's minds at ease. Furthermore, that all these buildings are fully sprinklered. So it's a sprinklered building and then it's protected by drywall encapsulation as well. So the fire inspector will be enforcing this provision. So drywall that's been removed for whatever reason would have to be restored. So it's not like in your house if you rip up old carpeting and you see nice hardwood floor and like, oh, who covered this up? There's a lot more at stake with that drywall. It's not a design choice. It is a fire protection choice. And so that's the fire code. And just to give you an idea of how tall these buildings can go and the fact that this is for every major occupancy, this is an excerpt from the building code. So first column, major occupancy, then you have maximum building height in stories, and then maximum building height in meters. And you see that these encapsulated mass timber constructions can go up to 18 stories high. So it's quite significant. It's quite a bit more than the 6 stories that was allowed in 2012. And so for group C, the residential occupancies, this is you guys, it's divided into 2. So maximum building height in stories, 8 stories, and then you can have a 0 rated encapsulation. And if you go above 8 stories, you need 70 minutes of encapsulation, meaning that the drywall would have to withstand for 70 minutes. And then this column here where my laser pointer is, that's the maximum building area, which is the bird's eye view footprint of the building. Yeah, so something to keep your eye out for because this is happening and it's going to continue happening. Nothing wrong with it. And you may find yourselves responsible for one of these buildings. And the drywall means all that much more, as well as maintenance of the sprinkler system. Next change, furniture in corridors and lobbies. So a very significant change that started because of a fire in Toronto. So in 2016, there's a fire at 1350 Nielsen Road. There was 4 fatalities. It was polyurethane furniture in the public corridor was intentionally ignited. So that's a picture you see is of this building. What this building was a seniors residence, but it was still a Group C residential major occupancy. And so the fire was arson, and it was chairs and couches set up in the public corridor for people to sit down while they're waiting for the elevator, etc. So perfectly natural, something that you may not have even thought anything of, especially since it was in a recessed portion of the corridor. So it looked like it was designed for it. So what's the problem that required a change in the fire code? So after this fire, we looked at the existing codes, and all we had to work with was 2411 sentence 2 that said combustible materials shall not be accumulated in any part of an elevator shaft, ventilation shaft, means of egress service room, or service space unless the location, room, or space is designed for those materials. That was problematic wording. It was unenforceable for this specific situation because it looked like it was designed for that purpose. And placing furniture is not really an accumulation of combustibles. So that situation was relatively unenforceable, and this fire exposed that. So what are we dealing with in terms of furnishings in your public corridor? It's stuff that you would normally not think anything of unless something bad happened. So something like this, you might walk by it every day and not realize. Here's another couch by an elevator. Seems perfectly natural that you would want that there. Here's groupings of furniture in the ground floor lobby. Again, yeah, this is something maybe you see in every building that's a high-rise building that you walk into. And so, yeah, this is how that happened, is that it looks pretty much natural until somebody lit the furniture on fire. And so the change in the fire code, Division B 2412, it applies to seating, tables, and display cabinets. So these are the types of furniture that is permitted under the appropriate circumstances that the fire code allows. Furthermore, it applies to residential occupancies, retirement homes, which is a subcategory of a residential occupancy, and a care occupancy. So it's a B3 care occupancy like nursing homes where people can't evacuate on their own. So only in these three occupancies. That's not to say it's not potentially a problem in other occupancies like offices. It would just have to be a much higher hazard for us to be able to address it with an inspection order. But these are the ones of immediate concern. So the requirements, the furniture is non-combustible or solid wood. So far not too comfortable or appealing. There's another or there. Or in groupings, maximum 4.6 meters squared and 3 meters apart. The space is sprinklered and there's smoke detection. So these requirements in the new fire code came from the City of Toronto's Engineering Technical Bulletin, which was a response to that Nielsen Road fire. So after that fire, because the fire code was inadequate for dealing with this, we created our own internal engineering technical bulletin to address it, and that was pretty much adopted with these provisions. So the last or is it can also be approved. So regardless of what's on the first three circumstances, another circumstance can be approved. And that's furthermore an extension of what we've been approving in City of Toronto with our engineering technical bulletin. What else do we approve? Is rated furniture. So many of you may have already addressed this internally with City of Toronto, where you purchase the right type of furniture, still has fabric, still has cushioning, it's comfortable to sit on, but it is fire rated. So there's a couple ratings that we follow. Technical Bulletin 133-91 and ASTM E1537-16. So two types of agencies and regulations or standards that regulate rated furniture. And the last thing in our engineering technical bulletin for these matters is we would still want smoke detection in those corridors. So if you encounter this, please bring it to our attention if you have any doubt of the furniture you have, or you're about to purchase furniture and you're not sure about the circumstances that we would approve. Just reach out and let us know. Contact your local fire inspector. Next requirement, checking and testing of egress doors. So egress means simply leaving the building. An extension of that definition, the umbrella term is means of egress. A means of egress is anywhere where you can possibly stand in the building, every door that's in your way. So now there's checking and testing of these egress doors to make sure that there's no door that would not function. And so this is new. So Division B 2723, all doors forming part of a means of egress shall be checked monthly to ensure that they are operable. So this is a check, and under the fire code, there's checks, there's inspections, and there's tests. You always need to keep test records. Whenever the fire code says a test is required, those records need to be kept in full. Anytime something is a check or an inspection, you only need to keep a record if you're prompted on a case-by-case basis. In this case, there's no such requirement to keep records of this check. What is a check? It's a visual observation, and you're just going to open the door, make sure it opened. That's all you need to do. But it is important that this is done just in case it ever becomes an issue, and it would become questionable whether or not somebody did their monthly egress door checks if in case of an emergency, a door was jammed or something to that effect. And so all that means is somebody has to walk through every single door once a month. So just make sure that's accounted for. You can put it as part of your routine security checks or other checks that you have to do anyway. Next requirement, Division B 2723. So what we have here is a revolving door.
Sorry, Harry, before you move on, there was a question in the chat that you're probably going to get to shortly, but specifically about suite doors. Do suite doors need to be checked monthly for closure and latching? Suite doors are problematic compared to other doors. Are suite doors to be checked monthly?
Uh, yes, yeah. Uh, Check suite doors monthly. So if I go back, it's all doors forming part of a means of egress shall be checked monthly to ensure that they're operable. So that would apply to suite doors. Just make sure it opens and closes. And so you actually had to check these doors monthly anyway. So in accordance with um, your regular requirements, that it was a door and a fire separation. So under the existing code requirements, that's still a new fire code. Uh, 2233 sentence 4, a door and a fire separation shall be inspected monthly. So yeah, take these seriously. So you had to do that anyway because that is a fire separation. Now, just by extension of that, you just make sure there's no door that's not in the fire separation that kind of you left without realizing that that also needed to be addressed. And so this is a very serious issue. I know it seems like a lot of work to do, but keep in mind that there has historically been lots of significant and unfortunate events, mass casualty events that resulted in fatalities by the fire leaving the compartment of origin. So some of the more noteworthy ones in Toronto was 2 Forest Laneway, where there were 6 fatalities because the fire spread into the public corridor and then into the stairwell where people succumbed to smoke inhalation. There was also the recent incident on Bleecker Street where we were very fortunate that there were no fatalities, but there were injuries. And if you look broadly to North America as a whole, the Bronx had a very significant fire that resulted in, I think it was about 17 fatalities. Started with a lithium-ion battery, and the fire left the unit of origin. So yeah, these are not changes for the sake of changes. It's a result of actual incidents that these were put into here. And so self-closing and latching is important for these matters. And as you are all aware, we do our routine inspections of all high-rise residential buildings, where depending on the building, we will check a sampling of these to make sure that they're operating. But if you can find a way to account for that, that's what you're required to do. We can discuss this at the end as well. Sorry.
There's just a couple of questions that are coming in through the chat, asking about specifically Christmas trees in lobbies and wreaths or art on corridor walls. Is that something you can speak to as well?
Christmas trees in lobbies. First of all, is the space sprinklered? Second of all, and most importantly, when you're dealing with lobbies, decorations, Christmas trees, etc., um, is it part of a means of egress? As in, here's the most important thing: does a dwelling unit have to walk by this decoration through this lobby? So if you're on a ground floor lobby, you put up a Christmas tree. Do people leaving their suite have to walk by this, or is it fully in its own fire compartment? That is the key issue there. If it is fully in its own compartment, please make sure that you are in compliance with CAN ULC S109 flame tests of flame-resistant fabrics and films. So you can have your Christmas tree, just make sure that it is rated for use in a means of egress. And wreaths on a door, if we're going by the book here, unfortunately, that's a nope. In terms of people putting wreaths on the outside of their doors, because that is very clearly an ignition source. But if they had a rated wreath or it was non-combustible, which doesn't sound like fun, but if they had it rated for CAN ULCS 109, or it was flame treated as per NFPA 705, then there is potential allowances to be had there. And again, we can assess this on a case-by-case basis. If in doubt or if you're having an issue, like I said, reach out to your local fire inspector and they can address it on a case-by-case basis. But that's what the wording of the fire code is. So basically any lobby or exit, it has to be rated. CAN ULC S109. That's all furnishings, decorations, Christmas trees, etc. Okay. So more questions. Are any door decorations a nope? How do we handle suite doors and stairwell doors with air pressure? That's coming up actually. And that is a big issue in most buildings, especially very windy days. I will address the door closure issue. In terms of decorations on the inside of a means of egress, uh, these buildings have what's referred to as a flame spread rating in the means of egress. So it's a comparison of the speed at which fire travels along a wall. I will get to that closer to the end of the presentation and I'll address that question. Okay, so back to revolving doors. So Division B 2723, the safety features of revolving doors shall be tested at intervals not greater than 12 months. If you have a revolving door, now it has to be tested. So this is new in the fire code, although it's not new in the building code. The building code always allowed revolving doors to supplement other vertical swinging access doors like you see in the picture there. Now in the fire code, the safety features that the building code requires, which is primarily the fact that the doors are collapsible, and if there's any automated motorized mechanism that stops when pressure is applied to it, that you need to test that. It is a test, so you need to keep a record, and it's an annual test of revolving doors. So that's new. Next, sliding doors. Sliding doors required to swing on their vertical axis in the direction of egress when pressure is applied shall be tested at intervals not exceeding 12 months. And so that's for your sliding egress doors. It's supposed to push open in an emergency if it's along a means of egress. So you just have to simply test that feature with a normal amount of force, which has always been 90 newtons, Newton being the metric system unit of force. Does the door open? Very good. Check. That's it. Just a checkbox on your annual record keeping. Next, we get into carbon monoxide alarms. So Division B 216. So applies to residential and care occupancies. The new addition here is care occupancy. So B3, is this a care facility? That's new. Required on every story of a suite, where previously it was only required on the story that had the sleeping room. And for multi-unit buildings, required for all suites that share a wall, floor, or ceiling with the service room or flue. The new addition here is the word flue. That's new in the new fire code. What is a flue? It is a defined term in the fire code. It is the exhaust duct of the fuel-fired appliance. So we understand that the service room in an apartment building, if it's sharing a floor, wall, ceiling, then all the dwelling units that share a floor, wall, ceiling need a carbon monoxide alarm. Now, we're also addressing the fact that you may have an exhaust duct running through the building adjacent to other units. Just in case a leak develops, those units also need carbon monoxide alarms. So that's the first set of changes there. Next, where a forced air furnace provides heat to a residential or care occupancy, you need a carbon monoxide alarm in public corridors of the residential and care occupancy, and in each suite directly heated by the forced air fuel burning appliance. And so this is a hot topic. I'll go into detail for this. First of all, for the public corridor, it's one detector for every 25 meters of corridor. And then any suite that gets hot air that originated from a fuel-fired appliance, those suites in a residential and suites of a care occupancy also need carbon monoxide. And so I want to go over an actual floor plan. So let's look at some of these requirements directly applied. So if somebody can just confirm in the chat, you guys should see a picture of a building. I meant to share my screen. Okay, very good. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so this is from an actual inspection that I had. So here's an example of a low-rise residential building. Where would we need carbon monoxide alarms? So let's look at some potential circumstances here, starting with the lowest level. And so let's see what we have on the lowest level. We have locker rooms, meter rooms, electrical rooms. So far, no. Sprinkler room, no. Here we go, boiler room. So that is implied to be a fuel-fired appliance. what is the requirement in the fire code? So I'll read it. 216.2.1, sentence 2. Where a fuel burning appliance is installed in a building, but not within a suite of a residential occupancy or a care occupancy, a carbon monoxide alarm shall be installed, A, in the service room or area where the appliance is installed. So right there, boiler room, you need one. Right here, where my cursor is, furnace room, you need one there as well. Next, adjacent to each sleeping area within each suite of a residential occupancy or a care occupancy, where the suite has a common wall or a common floor ceiling assembly with the service room or area where the appliance or flue is installed. And C, on each story without a sleeping area within each suite of a residential occupancy or a care occupancy, where the suite has a common wall or common floor ceiling assembly with the service room or area where the appliance or flue is installed. So no dwelling units on this floor. Let's go one floor up. So here's the ground floor, which means this entire unit and this entire unit so far, these two units need carbon monoxide alarms. So far it's just these two. Let's keep reading in the fire code. Let's look at sentence 3. Where a building contains a storage garage, a carbon monoxide alarm shall be installed, A, adjacent to each sleeping area within each suite of a residential occupancy or care occupancy, where the suite has a common wall or common floor ceiling assembly with the storage garage. B, on each story within a sleeping area within each suite of a residential occupancy or care occupancy, where the suite has a common wall or common floor ceiling assembly with the storage garage, and also sleeping rooms that are not dwelling units also need it. So do we have a storage garage? Let's go back up to the ground floor, sorry, the basement floor. And what you see here where my cursor is, these are all parking spaces indoors. So this meets the definition of a storage garage. People will be parking their cars there. So by virtue of that, in combination with the fact that we have a furnace and boiler, now all of a sudden, the entire ground floor, all these dwelling units need carbon monoxide alarms. They needed these carbon monoxide alarms already as per the 2015 fire code. So let's see what's new. Sentence 4. Where a forced air fuel burning appliance provides heated air to a building but is not located within a residential occupancy or care occupancy, a carbon monoxide alarm shall be installed in the service room or area where the appliance is installed if the appliance is located in the building. B, in the public corridors serving suites of residential occupancy where the corridor is directly heated by forced air fuel burning appliances, including one, at least one carbon monoxide alarm in each portion of a divided corridor. Two, each carbon monoxide alarm in an undivided portion of a corridor is spaced not more than 25 meters apart. C, adjacent to each sleeping area within each suite of a residential occupancy or care occupancy directly heated by the forced air fuel burning appliance. And D, on each story without a sleeping area within each suite of a residential occupancy or care occupancy directly heated by the forced air fuel burning appliance. So we have the ground floor covered. Now, because of this new requirement, let's look at the above floors. So what you see here is floors 2 to 5, your standard floor plan. Presumably, if these are fed by a forced air fuel burning appliance, meaning there's ducting that the air was heated by a furnace, so fuel fired appliance, and that ducting originated from a fuel fired appliance service room, and those ducting is going to each one of these suites, then all these suites now need a carbon monoxide alarm. Same thing with the corridor. If this corridor is served by forced air heating, then this corridor needs one for every 25 meters, and a corridor this length would need approximately one for every 25 meters. So about two carbon monoxide alarms would cover this corridor.
Chief Chilikin, sorry, I'm just going
Yes.
to jump in for a second because I do see that there's a number of questions coming in with respect to units that have fan coils installed. So fan coils that are fed from a central plant that may have gas-fired equipment, but the fan coil units themselves are hydronic. So are you able to clarify that?
Yes. So yeah, you do have to pay attention to the specific type of heating for the units and or the corridors. Are your units on radiators, which is heated from a boiler, but then it's liquid being sent out to the building? If that's the case, no, you do not need a carbon monoxide alarm unless you fall under the original sentence that you share wall, floor, or ceiling with that boiler room. Otherwise, you do not need a carbon monoxide alarm if you're on radiator heating. I know there's many more nuances here that need to be addressed. Things like fan coil units, where again, you have a boiler sending heated liquid through copper tubing, and then the fan goes over those coil units. Where is that heat? Where is the air originating from that's going over those fan coil units? You need to assess that. Something else that was requested of me to address, heat recovery ventilators. So you have heat recovery where you have heat being sucked out of the heated space for the purpose of replacing it with fresh air. Is that fresh air going back in further supplemented by a fuel-fired appliance, natural gas with a heat exchanger? That if a hole developed in that heat exchanger, you would have carbon monoxide going through that ducting system. So you understand the problem here. This needs to be addressed on a case-by-case basis with more complicated HVAC systems. Do you have hot air blowing into the corridor or suite? Yes. Is it electric? Then no. If it's 100% electric, but you have fan blowing over an electric heating element, the heat exchanger is electric fully, no, you don't need a carbon monoxide alarm. Are you on a heat exchanger that originated from a boiler, but it's still possible that the suction of that fan unit originated from somewhere that could have carbon monoxide? Then yes, you need a carbon monoxide alarm. So it is not simple. It has to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. If in doubt, definitely install the carbon monoxide alarm. If you have any doubt that that suction air where that air originated could someday potentially be transporting carbon monoxide, and typically is meant for the failure of a heat exchanger or failure of the flue exhaust where a leak develops, or the furnace room is spreading carbon monoxide because of a ventilation issue, and then it goes subsequently to the bordering units, which was already addressed, and then you may have air from that service room blowing through the rest of the building. So unfortunately, I can't give you a one-size-fits-all answer because there is no one-size-fits-all answer, except to say, if in doubt, put the carbon monoxide alarms in. And some other nuances here, some people have brought up, you have radiators in the suites, but a makeup air heating forced air into the corridor. In that case, only the corridor needs the carbon monoxide alarms. The units are on radiator, they do not need it based on that requirement. Just make sure that that weather stripping, it means all that much more. Okay, so if we have time at the end, we can address further questions regarding carbon monoxide. But yeah, if in doubt, you're going to contact your inspector to sort that out. Nothing wrong with that. That's what we get paid for. Okay, continuing along. Division B 6718, inspection of exit signs. Exit signs inspected annually to ensure visibility upon power failure. This is not new, it's just changed. Battery backup shall be inspected monthly for switchover and annually for the duration of the required time, be it 30 minutes or 2 hours. This is not a new requirement, but is a harmonization requirement. It was separated from the regular emergency power testing, and the exit signs are now addressed separately. So it's what the inspector would look for in the test records. Make sure your emergency lighting and your exit signs are two separate records. That is new, even though the testing of the exit signs was always required. Next, self-luminous or photoluminescent material shall be maintained in accordance with the sign's manufacturer's instructions or the conditions outlined in the approval under the building code. These exit signs were always in the building code and they were never addressed in the fire code until now. So not too common. At the bottom one, the photoluminescent, that's your glow in the dark exit signs. And the top one, that's your self-luminous, which is not as common. I don't see these as much anymore, but it's basically a radioactive gas that's inside glass tubing, and the tubing is coated with a phosphorescent material, and it gives a very faint glow. So it's tritium gas in the tubes, perfectly allowed. It's perfectly safe. It's just mildly radioactive, but just in case you have those in your building, I used to see them in a lot of movie theaters, but I don't see them around anymore. It would just have to be maintained as per the manufacturer. Next, we get into integrated fire protection and life safety systems. This is brand new, quite significant. Applies to systems installed on or after January 1st, 2020, required by the building code to be verified in conformance with CAN ULC S1001, standard for integrated systems testing of fire protection and life safety systems. So it applies to multiple systems that are connected to each other to make sure nothing falls between the cracks in terms of these systems communicating with each other. So the fire alarm system is the heart of this requirement. We'll go over that. So Division B 610, interconnections between fire protection and life safety systems shall be tested and maintained in conformance with CAN ULC S1001, standard for the integrated systems testing of fire protection and life safety systems. The two systems as defined by the standard, you have fire protection system, a system designed to detect and or react to a fire condition and aid in the warning, protection, or evacuation of building occupants, or suppress or control the spread of fire and its products, or any combination thereof. And a life safety system is a system designed to enhance or facilitate the safety of building occupants during an emergency situation. So with this second definition, I did get clarification from the fire marshal's office that carbon monoxide detection systems that turn on your exhaust fans in new storage garages, that falls outside the scope of this because that is deemed to be a domestic matter. So it's just something I got clarification from the fire marshal's office for that interpretation. So the system is regulated. The fire alarm system is the centerpiece of this requirement. A fire alarm system is comprised of, you have your control unit, you have your initiating devices like smoke detectors and pull stations, your notification appliances like your bells, primary source, secondary power source, and so you also have your auxiliary devices. And here's where CAN ULCS 1001 comes into effect. So where your annual CAN ULC S536 inspection testing and maintenance requirement ended, it ended here at the relay from the fire alarm system to the other system that it caused an input or output. And so that's just a regular 24-volt, normally open, normally closed relay. In your fire alarm test, they would just account for the fact that it's working up to that relay. What happens downstream of that relay? Did the smoke control system operate? Did the hood suppression system communicate, operate? Did the clean agent extinguishing system turn on? Door release mechanisms, elevator recall is a big one. With this integrated systems testing, we'll get to the frequency, but now you have to make sure that nothing has fallen between the cracks. The good news here is you're probably already doing 90 to 100% of this, depending on your building. What we're doing with this is now just making sure that nothing fell between the cracks here. And so we'll go over some details. Next system is elevators. You're already required to test your elevator functions quarterly as per Part 7 of the fire code. Did it ground? Did all the safety features for firefighters operate? Now with integrated systems, it's a little more detailed. You confirm that it recalled to the primary level. You confirm that it recalled to the secondary level. Initiating device within the elevator hoistway, machine room, control space rooms, elevator recall, and recall indicator illuminates intermittently. So if you had the smoke detector activate in the actual recall lobby, the elevators are supposed to go somewhere else. If the elevator shaft is where the alarm initiated, then you need an intermittent flashing light in the elevator's firefighter functions. So we're just making sure that this took place. This is an overlapping requirement with TSSA's inspection, CSA B44. So you should already be doing all this, but now the fire inspector will also be making sure. And obviously these functions are initiated and there's communication back and forth with the fire alarm system. Next, a relatively big one is emergency generators. So we were always already required to test our emergency generators. As per CSA C282, the Emergency Generator Inspection Testing Maintenance Standard, this was already in the fire code. With integrated systems testing, there is a significantly higher level of testing that's involved here. The CSA 282 standard, you monthly tested it by switching over a transfer switch, and it was just 30% rated capacity that you would be testing the output for. Annually, you required a 100% load test. So is it putting out the 100% output it's required in terms of emergency power? Your generator company could do this with a load bank, meaning they plug in a load bank, which is like a technical term for how like conventional stoves work. It's a heating element that draws the rated power and current, and that would be a pass. Now with the CAN ULCS 1001, that full rated capacity has to actually come from the emergency power systems that it's giving electricity to. So you actually have to run everything that receives emergency power. So your elevators, your fire pumps, your lighting, all of that has to happen. It's not once per year. It's going to be every 5 years. I'll get to the frequency, but this will take a higher level of coordination. So just be aware that once every 5 years, you need a significantly higher level of an annual or like whatever your annual is, that once every 5 year has to be at a much higher level to confirm all the integrations. Examples of things you're already doing, notification systems, like your fire alarm turns on fire, do not enter signs, you're already doing that. Fire pumps, you're already doing this. You're already required under section 6.6 to test your fire alarm systems at full rated capacity. What the integrated CAN ULCS 1001 requires is that you also simulate or actually test some of the failure features like loss of phase reversal, amongst other troubles that the fire pump can undergo that reports to the fire alarm system. So just a higher level of fire pump testing. Water supplies, any supervision, like what you see here is post-indicating valve. Here's a float valve in a water tank, another float valve. Just make sure that they're working properly and reporting to the fire alarm system. Water supplies is addressed separately, exact same requirements. Freeze protection systems, if there are thermostats, heaters, drum drip heat tracing, drum drip auxiliary drain boxes in your dry sprinkler system, make sure they're all working and that as required, they are supervised by the fire alarm system. So you're probably doing 100% of this. Just the one step that you're taking this further is making sure that the heater actually works, that thermostat freeze protection actually turned on the heater and is also reporting to the fire alarm system. Cooking equipment fire suppression, you're already doing this with your NFPA 96. Just make sure that if there's any shared component, like a shared exhaust system that has a function, that's addressed. Otherwise, NFPA 96 should be addressing 100% of this. Some of the other simple ones, hold open devices, you're already doing this. Now they can, tech company can upsell you to make sure that that door actually closed. Same thing with maglocks. You should have already been doing this as part of your annual. And did the magnet release and did the door open? But this is already part of your annual, so you should have already addressed 100% of this. Here's one that you may not be doing 100% of. So your smoke control, pressurization, and exhaust systems, Part 7 of the fire code already required that you test your smoke control system in your building if you have a smoke control system and relative to the degree that you have smoke control. Not every building needs extensive smoke control, but you may even just have small pressurization fans for your lower grade stories, for example. With this, whatever your test procedures were for your smoke control system, that once every 5 year test, you have to make sure that every last component of your smoke control system was in fact tested, not just your regular testing that your engineer designed for you. So it's just a higher level of testing for your smoke control. Test frequency, 1 year after completion of the first test, which is the first test would have been what building division did when they approved the building. And then 1 year after that, and then 5 years thereafter. The Ontario Fire Code waives the 1 year test for systems installed before January 1st, 2026. So starting now, basically. But this comes into effect for systems that were installed as of January 2020. So anything built as in the whole building or just a new system that was installed on an existing building, Anything in 2020 and 2021 is now due for their 5 year. So take a look, hire a coordinator or a consultant to assess your building and to see, make sure you're in compliance with CAN ULCS 2001. Any fire alarm contractor that you're hiring, make sure that they're addressing this and they're qualified to address it. Okay, we can address questions at the end pertaining to this. Next, let's talk about dangerous goods. So dangerous goods means materials or substances that are regulated by the Transportation of Goods regulations made under the Transportation of Goods Act Canada and classified as hazardous products under the Hazardous Products Act regulations made under the Hazardous Products Act Canada. So I mentioned that this second bullet point is new in the fire code in terms of the definition of dangerous goods. That is just the beginning of the additions in the new fire code. What they've done here is this first one, transportation of dangerous goods. They typically, that's a regulatory body for hazardous materials in transit. So roads, waterways, airways, how they're identified. So if you're ever on the highway and you're driving behind the propane tank, it has that yellow diamond number 2 or number 3 placard indicating that's a flammable gas or a flammable liquid. And so that's the purpose of these regulations. And then the second bullet point is WMIS. And anybody that's been in the workforce for a significant amount of time, you would have gotten WMIS training at some point in your working lives. WMIS always regulates and is designed, intended to regulate health and safety of the person. Now that these are specifically addressed in the fire code and the dangerous goods are regulated by the fire code, we, the fire inspector, have to now explicitly address this with regards to fire. How do these hazardous materials behave in fire conditions with respect to fire and explosion, either being the initiating source or a contributor to? And so what you're looking for is, here's your transportation of dangerous goods placards. So your class 1 explosives, class 2 gases, compressed gases, class 3 flammable liquids, 4 flammable solids, 5 oxidizers, organic peroxides, 6 are poison inhalation hazard, toxic substances, class 7 radioactive, class 8 corrosive, class 9 miscellaneous. So that's transportation of dangerous goods placards. If you have this, is now regulated by the fire code as well, explicitly. And WMIS. What you see here is old WMIS. So the fire code, what they've done is they copied and pasted from the National Fire Code. And so you'll see these old WMIS symbols, which is the circles with these letter classifications. Just an FYI, this is obsolete. So you will not find these letter designations anymore. This was phased out in approximately 2018 and replaced with a globally harmonized system. So what you're looking for is now this. So here's what you should be looking for with regards to your WMIS regulations and whether or not now you also have fire safety matters to address. It's these diamond placards, which is the globally harmonized system agreed upon by the United Nations. Canada adopted this. And so the actual hazard classifications are also much more extensive. It's subcategorized into physical and health categories, and then all the physical categories have a tremendous amount of subcategories that are expanded on from the old WMIS. So what's your role in all this with regards to addressing dangerous goods? So this is now in part 3 of the fire code that we fully address the storage, handling, and use of dangerous goods very extensively. I mentioned this was copied and pasted from the National Fire Code. So all of this was already in the National Fire Code. Now they're putting it into the Ontario Fire Code. And so you're not an industrial occupancy that uses this primarily as your business. So there's not too much to do here, but there is significant considerations. First considerations, does this meet the small quantity exemption? If you're wondering, let's say you have a swimming pool or you have some part of your residential occupancy that uses, for some reason, an excessive amount of hazardous materials, refer to table 3271, which is the small quantity exemption. That is an over-under. If you are over the small quantity exemption, you have to regulate it like you would an industrial occupancy that uses these. Very extensive regulation in terms of storage, handling, use, training, securing the site, maintaining ambient conditions, etc. If you are under the small quantity exemption, all you need to do is address safe storage, as in the container, ambient conditions in terms of appropriate temperature, humidity issues, reactivity and compatibility issues with other materials. Furthermore, we're going to address in the next slide that you also have to put all of these things in your fire safety plan. What question has come up inevitably? It's already come up a few times. Let's say I have 1 can of aerosols. Aerosols are explicitly and separately addressed in part 3 because they're particularly dangerous. Do I have 1 or 2 cans of aerosols and I use it for a cleaner? Do I have to actually address this? The answer is definitely yes. That's a perfect example because aerosols are particularly dangerous because of how they behave in a fire. They explode or rocket. And so a firefighter needs to know that they're walking into a janitor's closet or a service facility that has a can of aerosol in it. So store there's not much else to do except put it in your fire safety plan and address the fire safety planning requirements. But other things like if you're storing pool chemicals, please address now it's in 3.1.2, the bare minimum, and then in 3.2.7 for further expansion in terms of if you don't meet the small quantity exemption. Definitely make note of any hazardous materials, anything that meets the definition of dangerous goods. You now have to explicitly address it. And we could have enforced this already, but it may have been an oversight previously. Okay, so carrying on, let's talk about fire safety planning. Significant changes. Agricultural occupancy with a fire alarm system requires a fire safety plan now, not so relevant here. Spill control procedures for flammable combustible liquids. This is an administrative change. They copied and pasted from part 4 into section 2.8, the spill control for flammable liquids. This may or may not apply to you depending on how much flammable liquids you have to serve your building. Here's a significant one, keys available to supervisory staff. You already had to comply with this requirement locally in Toronto because we have a fire safety plan box bylaw. So we already required under Chapter 470, the City of Toronto bylaw, that you already needed a fire safety plan box with supervisory staff service keys. Now they've also put that requirement in the fire code. So it's just doubling down on what you've already been doing. This is a bit of a hot topic as well. Make sure you never put private rented spaces like tenant spaces, especially residential dwelling unit keys. Do not put them in the fire safety plan box. We don't want them, and you guys can understand the problems that causes. They go missing, somebody steals it, now you have to rekey your whole building. We want service room keys. Let me into the fire alarm room, sprinkler room, etc. And there's no issue. You guys know what you like, what the firefighters like to see. Firefighter rolls up on site. You're standing there with the keys dangling. Everybody's happy. Otherwise, they're in the fire safety plan box. Next, dangerous goods. So dangerous goods, materials present including radioactive, which would apply to industrial facilities and hospitals, not so relevant for residential. What needs to go in your fire safety plan? Quantities and locations. How much do you have and where is it? Method and arrangement of storage relative to the hazardous material. Emergency contacts and procedures. There needs to be contact information for 24 hours, the address, name, and phone number of the person who's responsible for handling your dangerous goods. It could be the superintendent. You also want to have CanUtech's phone number in there. But this is very significant for all audiences. Please make sure you're required to review your fire safety plan annually anyway. Just please make sure that you are doing that annual review, and you may need a resubmission of your fire safety plan to address dangerous goods. Those are the questions. What do you have? How much do you have? Where is it? Include all that contact and emergency procedure information. Very important. Please address this within the 12-month period. And again, we can talk about this afterwards. You guys can call me or email me afterwards as well to discuss details. Other changes. Part 4, flammable combustible liquids, may or may not be relevant to residential facilities. They pretty much deleted all of Part 4, and then they copied and pasted from the national fire codes. Actually, it's pretty much still the same. Just a lot of rewording and renumbering with some significant changes. Something that may apply if you have one of those cabinets, like is pictured on the left here. Um, Only one standard is approved for any new cabinets, ULC ORG C1275 for new cabinets. But otherwise, make sure you have your spill controls procedures. That's all the same. Nothing else has changed with regards to the needs of residential occupancies. Demolition. Division B 81215, fire separations in partly occupied buildings. Where part of a building continues to be occupied, the occupied part shall be separated from the building, from the part of the building being demolished by a fire separation having a fire resistance rating of not less than 1 hour. And so what we're talking about here is your demolition site. Just make sure if you're demolishing a unit within a broader building that you keep it fire separated because you don't want people evacuating next to a demolition site. Next, protection during shutdown. Except as permitted in sentence 2, where a fire protection system is provided, the fire protection system shall remain operational throughout the demolition where reasonably practical. And 2, when any portion of a fire protection system is temporarily shut down during demolition operations, alternative measures shall be taken to ensure that protection is maintained. Wouldn't necessarily apply to a residential unit being renovated, but it's more applicable to places like retail, like malls, for example. Just make sure you're not disabling any fire alarm device specifically. Next, doors and a means of egress under Part 7. Where vestibules, stair shafts, or other areas are pressurized as a means of smoke control, all doors in the path of exit travel shall be tested to ensure that the doors can be operated as required in Article 2721 when the entire smoke control system is being tested. So finally, they put this in here. We've always encountered issues with this, not on a mass scale, but this has come up once in a while for a very long time now, where particularly in places like office buildings, you have a giant pressurization fan at the top of the building, and it turns on to keep smoke out of the shaft in a fire alarm. That's what it's supposed to do. As a side effect of that, you pressurize this entire stairwell, and now this door won't open. So now we can enforce that. 90 newtons of force for all egress doors. 90 newtons. Like I said, it's a unit of force, not to be confused with the big Newton, but is a unit of force for opening a door. And so if your door cannot be opened unless like a large adult can body check their way through it, that is definitely a violation. And now we have to address it. So bring that to our attention, or hire a consultant to basically deal with this issue. But now we have to resolve it. If you have issues with regards to pressure changes outside to inside, that is a matter to be resolved by HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Do not cut vents into your door, obviously. You just have to be able to balance the pressure such that these doors always open with not more than 90 newtons. We can talk about more of that later. Homes for special care, long-term care homes, retirement homes, and other care facilities regulated by sections 9.4 and 9.7. So now in the new fire code, sprinkler coverage only required on those stories of the building that are occupied by regulated occupancies. Sprinkler coverage are not required for those stories of the buildings where the regulated occupancies occupy not more than 10% of the floor area of the story. This is an absolutely massive relaxation. So when the 2015 Fire Code and Section 9.7 first came out, the requirement was if you had a residential apartment building, but all of a sudden you've inadvertently or on purpose knowingly veered into a B3 major occupancy, such that now you have all residents and that need care for daily living, personal services workers, and they need assistance to evacuate. In those cases, very readily, you automatically needed a fully sprinklered building. So this is a relaxation. Now you only need to sprinkler the floors that we're going to deem a care occupancy, B3. Furthermore, if those B3 units are limited to 10% of the whole floor area, again, you do not need sprinklers. So good news there. in terms of a relaxation from a very kind of daunting requirement for certain older B3 occupancies that maybe weren't designed properly in the first place. Sprinkler protection is critical, and just continue to make sure you're doing your annual evacuation drills to make sure that everybody can be removed and evacuated safely. Next requirement, retrofitting of care and treatment and residential occupancies for low-rise apartment buildings and two-unit houses regulated by sections 9.5 and 9.8. A self-contained living unit that consists of boarding, lodging, and rooming accommodations for 4 or fewer persons and includes both a bathroom and kitchen facilities for the exclusive use of persons residing in the unit shall be deemed a residential unit. So that is very important, a very significant change. This applies to all low-rise buildings. So if you have a building up to 6 stories, pay attention. If you have a rooming house being subletted out of one of your units in your building, up to 4 people, and the fire code now says that that is okay. And there's no limit to that in terms of the number of these 4-unit rooming houses you have, which means it is now up to you to permit it or to deny it. For example, like the picture I showed with the carbon monoxide example, if you had a low-rise apartment building and that seems to be getting out of hand, where you have all these units with that are rooming houses for 4 people, be mindful that, yeah, if it crosses any safety thresholds that just makes you uncomfortable, do not hesitate to contact the inspector to come and take a look. But yeah, very significant change. Up to 4 people in a low-rise that are boarding, lodging, rooming is deemed to be a dwelling unit or a residential unit. No further requirements. Specific to section 9.8, this is for 2-unit, so like your basement apartment, your duplexes, that's what section 9.8 applies to. The word existing is removed from the application. So now it applies to all 2-unit facilities, where previously it only applied to facilities, houses that were built or the second unit existed previous to July 1994. Now we can apply this on an ongoing basis with some consideration for when it was done and when the house was built in the first place. We can still potentially apply with an inspection order some building code requirements. Electrical Safety Authority letter of compliance is now discretionary, where previously it was mandatory, and repairs conducted by a licensed electrical contractor. So if you have a basement apartment, we used to automatically require an Electrical Safety Authority inspection. Now it can be assessed on a case-by-case basis. What kind of high voltage equipment have you installed, etc. So it's at the discretion of the inspector. Examples of very subtle changes that we need to pay attention to. So specific to section 9.5, which is for low-rise buildings, when you needed to separate your storage rooms or furnace rooms, this is what it said. Existing storage rooms are deemed to be in compliance with clause 1B, where the building A contains not more than 4 dwelling units, or B provides sleeping accommodations for not more than 10 persons. And 3, existing storage rooms are deemed to be in compliance with sentence 1, where sleeping rooms are not located on the same floor as the storage rooms. And A, the building contains not more than 4 dwelling units, or provides sleeping accommodations for not more than 10 persons. Subtle change. The highlighted ors used to be ands, which means you used to have to meet both of these conditions for that to apply. Now you just meet one of those conditions. Furthermore, very significant, this is where it actually has already even come up with inspectors. A single exit from a basement, first or second floor, is deemed to be in compliance with sentence 1, where the building is not more than 3 stories in building height and is not greater than 600 meters squared in building area, and A, the exit does not serve more than 4 dwelling units, or B, the exit does not serve more than 10 persons. So that or used to say and, which means previous to January 1st, you had to meet both of these conditions to allow the use of one exit only. So which means maximum 4 units and maximum 10 persons. Now the fact that that's been switched to an or, you can have more than 4 dwelling units as long as you don't have more than 10 persons. And now that apartment can just have one exit. This is for retrofit, so older facilities, older apartments. And vice versa, you can have 4 dwelling units, but more than 10 persons, and that's still okay for one exit. That is a significant change that has already been an issue for a couple old buildings. And just to kind of give context here, anything with a 9, so these previous slides, that's a retrofit. So it applies to old buildings that needed to be brought up to a bare minimum standard. Furthermore, rooming houses, section 9.3. So rooming houses, corridors and stairs, flame spread rating decreased to 150 from 200, and smoke alarms required in sleeping rooms. So flame spread rating has been reduced to 150 for rooming houses. Going back to that previous flame spread rating question, 150 is just a factor that's compared to red oak. Red oak is given a factor of 100. So wood usually lives in the neighborhood of 100 to 150. That's not a kind of no aggravating factors like varnishes. But that is a very slow fire spread. So just in general, in your corridors and your rooming houses, in the means of egress, always be mindful of wallpaper. Any processed wood is no good. And then if you have natural wood, we assess it on a case-by-case basis to make sure the flame spread rating never exceeds 150. That is a very common number for all public corridors. And then exits is always 25 flame spread rating. So just be mindful of that. We do not like wallpaper or particle board manufactured wood in means of egress. And for rooming houses, smoke alarms are now required in all sleeping rooms. In addition to the common area smoke alarms that were already required, that's a very significant change. Please do not ignore that change. If you're aware of a rooming house or you're responsible for a rooming house, nothing wrong with that. You need a smoke alarm in every sleeping room. So very big change there. And then lastly, other changes, 2,500 changes in total. Obviously, we can't get to them all. Smoke detection is part of a residential fire warning system in conformance with CAN ULC S540. So in terms of your residential fire warning system, if you had a facility like a care occupancy, that's where this would come into effect. Your typical ADT smoke alarms, your kind of domestic security system that also is responsible for smoke detection, now that's recognized as meeting the equivalent of a smoke alarm. A very good idea if you're having trouble passing your fire drills in your care occupancy or retirement home. So it's just a security system option you have now to know exactly which detector is going off. So something like that would be an alternative solution. Or for your house, as long as it meets this requirement, it counts as your smoke alarm. And very importantly, be mindful that there is now a new CAN ULCS 536. We're now into the 2019 edition. For your annual and monthly fire alarm system inspection, maintenance, and testing, it is approximately 30% more involved and more requirements. So you are going to be getting an extensively larger report. So just be mindful of that your annual, make sure it meets the 2019 standard, which is a significantly higher standard. If in doubt, give us a call. So that is our last slide in the presentation. I will turn it over to you, Sophia.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chief Chilikian, for that very informative and insightful presentation. Before we move to questions, we'd like to invite everyone to attend our upcoming CCI Toronto area events. These events are listed on our website, and you can use the QR code on your screen to go directly to the page and learn more. We're now going to open up the floor to questions. If you haven't already, please submit your questions using the Q&A. Let's avoid using the chat because I feel like there's a little bit of conversation as well as questions going on in the chat. So if you can direct your questions to the Q&A, that'll be a lot easier for us to get to. Thanks, everyone.
Okay,
So do we want to maybe start off with the first question that's in the chat, or sorry, the Q&A? I actually did want to mention something. There were a few questions that came in, and we did get a message that was directed to us. It said, you mentioned weather stripping on unit doors. We were advised not to apply to our individual unit main egress door. Please comment. What I do want to add, I'll let you speak on the carbon monoxide part of it, but with respect to weather stripping suite doors, In older buildings where fresh air is provided or ventilation is provided by the makeup air via the corridors, it's the gaps around the suite doors that allow ventilation into the suites versus a newer construction that has dedicated ventilation like HRVs and ERVs. Typically, those suite doors are weather stripped to compartmentalize with respect to ventilation. But I think there is a bigger question, and I think you had started to answer it with respect to carbon monoxide detection requirements. If someone is in a building where you have gas-fired makeup air that's serving the corridors, and it is an older building that doesn't have dedicated ventilation in the suites, and so you have those gaps around the suite doors and the corridors, is carbon monoxide detection required in the suites?
Yeah. So if there's makeup air for the corridor only, but the suites are on a radiator, then you do not need carbon monoxide alarms in the suites unless they fall under the original requirement of sharing a wall, floor, or ceiling with the service room. Weather stripping, though, that is heavily regulated. So because of smoke travel issues. So the NFPA 80 standard for doors, you're not allowed more than a 3 millimeter gap on the sides and a 6 millimeter gap on the bottom. That is the maximum size of gap you are allowed on your suite doors between the suite and the public corridor. So nothing wider than that. So if your corridor is served by makeup air, if that weather stripping is in place, it shouldn't be an issue. But yeah, just please make sure that you always maintain your weather stripping to those standards. Yeah, and Sophie, I'll let you read out the Q&A.
Sure. Okay, so we'll start off. I think this was mostly answered throughout the presentation about are there changes to the fire code with respect to carbon monoxide and smoke detectors that affect the common elements in residential units in the condo. Well, I think we can skip that one. That was generally answered. The next question was what was the tech bulletin number for fire-rated furniture?
It's a technical bulletin 133 or ASTM E1537. So those are the two that we recognize in Toronto as part of our kind of engineering technical bulletin, which is our guidance for how to sort out these issues. Those are the two ratings you want to see on your furniture. If in doubt, please reach out before you make your purchase. So request an inspection for that purpose, but those are the two recognized standards. And also keep in mind, because this is all new, we are in a review phase with all of our internal policies and bulletins. So there could be change potentially. So that's why I'm also emphasizing just reach out before you make an expensive purchase.
Hey, the next question is the fire code seems to say that responsibility for compliance with the new CO alarm requirements for rented units lies with the landlord, owner of the unit. Does this apply to condos as well, meaning condos aren't required to ensure CO alarm compliance for these units? Not sure if this applies to fire alarms as well.
Yeah, so this is a common issue that has come up with regards to smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms, is that who's responsible when it's a condominium that's privately owned? So we address this as in we will put the responsibility on the condo unit and the condo corporation. So for us, the owner is responsible. It's anybody that's in care and control is the definition of the owner. And so that's the actual individual condo owner and the condo corporation as a whole. And if any property management company has been delegated this requirement, for example, contractually, they would also be held responsible. So the answer is everybody. And further with this issue, both with carbon monoxide alarms and smoke alarms, it's in the fire code since 2015 that the tenant shall notify the landlord as soon as they're aware that has been disabled. So that's something for you guys, right? They can't just disable it and then call us because we can say, did you let the landlord know? So yeah, very important that you're on top of this. Just keep meticulous records with regards to any problematic situations with regards to smoke and CO alarms. Very important because that's the cause of many fatalities.
All right, next question is if we sent a form to residents indicating that the door closing test could we accept notice from residents that they check the door and it closes and latches under its own weight, or does the condo staff have to personally check each suite door?
I'd be okay with confirmation because it doesn't say it's not like the same as a fire alarm a test that has to be done by a CFA technician. You need to account for that fact, but there is due diligence involved with all of this stuff. Make sure you do your due diligence. If you're only kind of putting that responsibility on others, that may not qualify if ever something comes up. You may still want to be doing a hands-on sampling yourself as well as delegating. And also, don't forget, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't actually know how this would play out if something bad happened. So the answer to that question is due diligence. But I would accept that personally as an inspector if you had confirmation, some kind of record that it was addressed.
All right, the next question is the wording regarding sliding doors says that they must be tested, not checked. And as such, I believe a record of the test must be maintained. Am I wrong?
And if it says test, you need to keep a record of it. So your revolving door and your sliding door, you need to keep a record of that. I don't see any requirement to keeping records of checking the new requirements to check your egress doors. Unless it otherwise says so, you do not need to keep a record of checks or inspections, but pay close attention to that. Um, sorry, yeah, so 2724, it says records of tests required by 2723, 2, 3, and 4 shall be made and retained in conformance with section 1, 1, 2. So yeah, so yeah, sentence 2 is for tests, and sentence 3 is for tests, and maglocks is for tests, and excluded is your checking. So you do not need to keep a record of your checks.
Okay, next question is per the carbon monoxide alarms being required in each suite, does this apply to York Region as well?
Yes, yeah, it's the Ontario Fire Code.
Next question is does the CO detector have to be hardwired or is battery acceptable?
Battery is acceptable.
Excellent. Okay, next question. The new fire code requires a mandatory inspection of all residential egress doors monthly. Compliance with this rule may be problematic as some residents may resist for privacy or security reasons, where they insist to be on site whenever anyone enters their suite. What are the best practices to overcome this issue?
So I do have to kind of take this away to consider all these specific nuances. I don't want to lead you astray here. It does need to be accounted for. That's the most important thing. But if you had condo units and they acknowledged that it was working and it was otherwise not brought to your attention, you had some kind of record acknowledging that it worked. Uh, in my opinion, that is adequate. But don't forget, you have to do your due diligence. Did you do everything possible to ensure that all these doors are functioning properly? So I would ensure that you see all of these doors at some point, let's say like a sampling of them on a routine basis to make sure eventually you do capture every single last door.
So the next question, I believe you answered when we talked about fan coil units, but the question is if the makeup air units are on the roof of the building and the air is tempered by hot water via heat exchanger, do we need CO detectors in the corridors that have common ceiling walls or floors with the boiler room?
Oh, well, if it has a common wall, floor, or ceiling with the boiler room, the corridor does not, just based on sharing that border, because that requirement is only for the suite itself. But if that public corridor is served by forced air, and that forced air originated from the boiler room, either whether it's a furnace or it's actually the suction is from a service room, for example, or other where carbon monoxide is possible, then yes, you would need it under those circumstances.
And that's because there's boilers usually in the boiler room, you're saying.
Well, the boiler is going to be a fuel-fired appliance that's heating
Mhm.
water that could be sending it through a fan coil unit or radiator system.
Right.
So it's not necessarily a furnace system where the heat exchanger is the natural gas transferring through a piece of metal into the hot air that's then circulated to the units. So in that case, if you had a hole in a furnace heat exchanger, you can see that's very dangerous. And this
Mhm.
actually happened in Guelph, and we're lucky that there wasn't fatalities. So all of this is because these things are happening. But if it's defined as a boiler, presumably you're just heating liquid. Where is that liquid going? What is that liquid doing? And is there at any point in that heating system forced air involved? Where is the supply of that forced air? So you do really need to look at this on a case-by-case basis.
All right, next question is there a new inspection list that has been issued by the fire department with the new codes taken into consideration?
Sorry, the basically the new fire code has been uh, what's the word? It's been given to all the fire inspectors, and this training has been given to all fire inspectors. It is not physically available for purchase yet, but everything in the new fire code is available on e-laws if you want to take a look.
Okay, the next question is if there's any mandatory requirement for residential units to have fire extinguishers.
No requirement. It's Section 6.2 only applies to common areas, not to individual dwelling units. It's a good idea, but don't forget fire extinguishers have their own maintenance requirements. You get it serviced minimum every 6 years.
Okay, next question is whose responsibility is it to ensure that carbon monoxide alarms are installed in each apartment? Is it the property manager, the board, or up to owners?
That is actually out of our decision making. That's up to you guys. So one of my more involved inspections that I had done previously in my time as an inspector was I encountered a low-rise condo. There could have been, I don't remember exactly how many, but it was well over 100 condo units. And the 10-year mark came from the date of construction, and all the factory constructor smoke alarms expired at the same time. No internal battery to change. They all started chirping at the same time. And then what happened next is they're all disabled at the same time. I had to go and sort that out. Don't let that happen. I recommend you delegate that task to your fire alarm contractor to go in every unit and make sure everybody has a working smoke alarm and carbon monoxide alarm. Because if you leave it up to the individual condo units, you may not get 100% compliance rate. And what happens if we have a fire fatality and that's deemed to be the cause? Then the courts will definitely sort out who's responsible, and it would be everybody. So the condo unit, the condo corporation, and any property management companies. I don't actually know how that would play out, but that's what I'm presuming. So you do need to be careful with these matters. And I recommend having everything tested by a contractor annually instead of just delegating that to each individual unit.
Okay, next question is any restrictions on common area / corridor carpets?
So carpeting is always the largest allowance in building and fire codes. Make sure so the building code that's the highest flame spread rating ever is for the floor, and the building code number has always been 300 in terms of the flame spread rating. That's still relatively slow. Uh, yeah, be mindful that your carpeting means building code installation flame spread rating, which is never more than 300. Uh, don't get crappy counterfeit carpeting. One of the most kind of infamous fires that resulted in a lot of fatalities was the MGM Grand Hotel in 1980. The fire traveled 14 to 19 feet per second. So take that seriously. Buy good quality carpeting where the flame spread rating is addressed. So that is your responsibility to get compliant carpeting. So yes, it is important.
Okay, some more questions on the same note. What about existing buildings? I have a building less than 2 year old, but I do not believe that the lobby furniture is fire retardant. Do we have to replace it?
Uh, in residential care occupancy, the answer is yes, you have to replace it.
Okay.
Or you comply with one of the other requirements, like it's sprinkled with smoke detection, which is a very high bar. But if you're going to fall under the approved provision, yes, you need rated furniture if you don't have sprinklers.
Okay, there's a question here about what is the fire rating for lobby furniture fabric?
So that's as per the two standards I mentioned. There's no flame set rating. It has to pass specific fire testing that it undergoes in a laboratory setting that is conducted by laboratories, either the ASTM 1537 or the Technical Bulletin 133. So the furniture is actually tested in a laboratory setting with certain test parameters that it undergoes. So not quite the same as flame set rating.
So similar question with respect to fan coils. Please clarify if we need CO detection for suites with heat pumps inside the unit. So again, hydronic type equipment.
Um, a case by case basis. I know that's not the answer you want, but if you have a heating coil and the supplier is coming directly from the outside, there's no natural gas involved whatsoever in that process. The liquid is heated remotely from another part of the building. You may not need carbon monoxide alarms, but I would want to, for me to give you a conclusive answer, see the actual specifications of the actual equipment and the overall HVAC plans. So this is what you have to do. If you have any doubt, go to billing division, get the plans, get the HVAC plans, because you have to assess this on a case by case basis. Is it possible to get CO blowing through that fan? That's the question.
Next question is, where do you find the technical bulletins? Is there a website that they're all posted?
So, no, I don't know if that's publicly available information. The ULC standards, you can ULC and NFPA, you can make an account on their websites and you can see all of it. That's the good news if it's ULC. For example, flame set rating is CAN ULC S102. You can actually go on and see everything it says. For fabrics, for example, it's CAN ULC S109. You can go on CULC's website and see what it says. And then you're making sure the tag is there. But the technical bulletin and ASTM, I don't have access to those. Sorry, I don't have access to those for free access. We have access internally. So I do have access like a hard copy, or I refer to our engineers. But in terms of public access, that's not something that's available through us.
Next question is, who's responsible for phase 2 of elevator testing, elevator technician or fire alarm technician?
The elevator tech. So the phase 1 firefighter service is the elevators grounded with the door open. Basically, the fire alarm test doesn't even have to go that far, but it's something that you confirmed that the function happened, part of your monthly, your full load, your full fire alarm test. You'd indicate that that happened, but then the CSA B44 should also be applied for the entire elevator functioning under Part 7 of the Fire Code. In terms of phase 2 firefighter service, where you're actually testing the in-car functions. That is not the fire alarm technician's job.
The next question is a three-part question. So the first says, does the rule prohibiting wreaths or decorations on unit doors also apply to units with exterior-facing entrances? For example, ground floor units with direct outdoor access as opposed to units accessed through a common hallway?
No, it would not apply outside.
If the condo corporation just completed the annual inspection and an owner decides to replace a smoke alarm themselves, do we still have to get a fire technician to inspect this smoke alarm?
The smoke alarms need to be inspected annually. That's the bottom line. So annually, anytime you change the batteries, anytime you change the electrical circuit, anytime you have a change in tenancy, annually is the big one. Somebody has to do that. Yeah, it needs to be accounted for by you or the technician under your annual. I recommend that it's your technician that you add that in.
The last part of the question is the storage in the parking spaces considered fire code violation? And if yes, please elaborate on the reason why.
Okay, so with regards to parking in storage garages, that is another hot topic that comes up all the time. Storage garage is a defined term, so it means any parking garage, and it has a very specific sprinkler system for cars. So under NFPA 13, it's an ordinary hazard group 1 occupancy that sets the exact amount of water that's coming out of those sprinkler heads. So you can kind of guess what the problem is. If you have a certain storage that may be beyond what would be addressed by a car sprinkler system, then it could overwhelm the sprinkler system. It's not designed for those purposes. It could also be egress issues as well. So this has been tried and tested with the Fire Safety Commission. So the answer is no, you can't fill your parking spots with storage. There is some gray area involved with regards to designating a caged fenced area for storage with very highly regulated storage that's taking place in there. But obviously, if there was just nothing but tires in this storage, no, that is a big deal. So a caged segregated area with the combustibility never exceeding that of what a car sprinkler system would be, because we don't want to overwhelm the sprinkler system. So the answer is no, you can't do that. But there is a bit of a gray. So reach out to your area fire inspector to get clarification, because we do have internal guidelines for assessing this.
All right. Next question is lighting is an issue in suites with GU10s where it can cause fire to the kitchen cabinet drawers, which happened in my condo. We have advised residents to change to LED.
Uh, so in terms of lighting and electrical issues, just make sure everything is listed CSA device, and that only like electrical installations fall under the jurisdiction of the Electrical Safety Authority. We enforcing the fire code of Toronto Fire Services. Unfortunately, we don't have jurisdiction over that. So it's under the jurisdiction of the Electrical Safety Authority. If we saw counterfeit or hazardous electrical installations like counterfeit lighting or hazardous lighting, what the process is, once we confirm a problem, we issue an electrical inspection order to the Electrical Safety Authority, and then they conduct an inspection based on our order. So we can still do something about it. The inspector would confirm a hazard. So please feel free to reach out to us and also reach out directly to the Electrical Safety Authority because we can address it indirectly. Yeah.
Okay, next question is a corporation that allows owners to change their unit door lock by themselves and have different locks. There is no specific master key for all units. Is there any fire code issue, and if so, how do we handle it?
There's nothing in the fire code that requires us or requires there to be a master key to dwelling units. So that's up to you guys how you want to run that. If there's a fire, firefighters will break the door in safely, considering the safety of occupants. But no, we do not need a master key of any kind into tenant spaces. We want service room keys, and that's it. Obviously, it's ideal, but to have access to dwelling units in an emergency, but nothing for us to enforce there. Nothing.
Okay, next question is what would be the sampling amount for door testing in condos?
I can't answer that off the top of my head. So this question has come up a lot in this session. I have to get back to you on that because it is something that's important to sort out because you guys want to do your due diligence, you want to do the right thing, but you also don't want to go above and beyond something that is potentially invasive to occupants and a burden to you guys if it's not necessary. So let me take that away and ask our engineering team what they think. And at some point, I'll put forth an answer to that.
Okay, next question is we have testing of suite door latching as part of our annual fire inspection. Is this good enough?
So the wording is in 2233. So closures and fire separation shall not be obstructed, blocked, or wedged open or altered in any way that would prevent the operation of the closure. And then it says for a door and a fire separation shall be inspected monthly. Yeah, so it is a monthly requirement.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just maintaining an operating condition.
Next question is who's responsible for maintaining, inspecting gas fireplaces to prevent fires, owner or condo corp?
It's everybody. The owner is responsible from our perspective. And feel free to contact TSSA for specific details on those things. It's largely TSSA's jurisdiction, anything related to fuels.
Does the condo corp need to check the balcony sliding doors of units?
The answer is no.
So I think this is something we've touched on already, but is weather stripping allowed to be installed by residents about suite doors or is it against code?
No, weather stripping can be installed by anybody as long as it's done properly.
But again, like I had mentioned before, keep in mind that if you do live in an older building where you don't have dedicated ventilation in your suite, either by an HRV or ERV, you're relying on the ventilation from the makeup air that feeds the corridors. So that can cause issues to weather strip the suite door. For example, you might end up with issues with excessive condensation in the winter. And that's why most corporations, most boards will not allow their residents to install weather stripping around suite doors. Okay, next question is, if my unit is right next to the hall ventilation system vent, should I install CO detector?
Have the proper weather stripping, 6 millimeters at the bottom, 3 millimeters on the sides is maximum. When you close your door, do you see significant amount of light going in? Address that because that's a violation on itself. And then otherwise, based on just being next to where the heat comes out in the public corridor, there's no requirement. So you're back to 216.2.1 sentence 2. Do you share floor wall or ceiling with a service room or storage garage? And then other than that, if you're on radiator, then you don't need it. Or baseboard electrical heating as well.
Okay, next question is what is required by section 7.3 for smoke control equipment in an older building with only a pressurization system for the elevator shaft and not the stairwells?
It needs to be tested. So in part 7 of the fire code, a lot of the testing requirements are left up to the owner to hire an engineer and for an engineer to establish a smoke control inspection, maintenance, and testing program appropriate for that um, pressurization fan. So we would assess it on an annual basis, but something else is also permitted. Just because there's no frequency that's prescribed here, it's prescribed that you hire an engineer to create a program for inspecting, testing, and maintaining your smoke control.
Okay, next question is has Toronto Fire developed a new update on lithium batteries in bicycles and EVs?
There's nothing in the fire code that addresses EVs. That is entirely in the jurisdiction of Electrical Safety Authority. Same thing that I said previously, that if you see a violation or something that makes you uncomfortable that somebody did in their unit, or it wasn't done properly with an Electrical Safety Authority permit, bring that to our attention and we can cause an inspection order for the electrical safety to do an inspection.
Would you please confirm if a smoke/ventilation test is mandatory in the first year and then again every 5 years?
As smoke control systems overall, the testing has to be done at the commissioning stage when it's brand new for a brand new building. Then the smoke control test that the fire code in 7.3 requires is basically that you design a protocol. It says basically, where is it? Yeah, procedures described. So upon completion of assessment, so an assessment is necessary and you need written procedures for periodic inspections and tests established. And the procedures described in sentence 3 shall bear the signature and seal of a professional engineer or architect. So you need to hire an engineer or architect to establish those procedures for your overall smoke control system. And furthermore, you also have to make sure that every 5 years after the initial commissioning and initial 1 year that you test every function of the smoke control.
Okay, next question is does the storage facility for e-bikes and similar have special requirements?
Under the Electrical Safety Authority, yes. The fire code is silent on that. So with electrical vehicles, if there's anything going on in there more than the individual usage of an e-bike, that's a problem and we will address it. If somebody's repairing e-bikes, that is an emergency. Let us know immediately. But if somebody's normal usage of an electric vehicle in a parking garage or an e-bike in their unit, one per unit, there's not much we can do about that. But any installations, nobody's allowed to MacGyver anything in their unit. Any installations have to be done by the Electrical Safety Authority with a permit.
Have the fire regulations been updated or changed to accommodate fires arising from EV vehicles?
The fire code has not addressed anything. The codes are kind of slow to address that.
And I think the next question is answered as well. Are there any regulations for residents who store EV scooters in their suites?
No regulation, but if in doubt, call us because that is causing a lot of actual fires with serious consequences. So anything more than non-counterfeit batteries, non-counterfeit bikes being stored there with a normal domestic charging system, anything that deviates from that or you suspect that it deviates from that, feel free to call us. Absolutely no repair work, zero, because that is causing lots of fires. So anybody has more than one e-bike, just give us a call and we'll come take a look. It may or may not be a problem.
Next question is, can a resident use their vehicle for storing items inside the underground garage?
The answer is no, unless you have a designated area that was approved by Toronto Fire Services.
Can you repeat where we can get a copy of the fire code?
As of right now, it's e-laws. So Google Ontario Fire Code, Um, Click on the provincial government website link, and the whole thing is there. The hard copy is not available for purchase yet, but eventually it will be.
Okay. Is there a list of certified technicians that can be hired for consultations? What certifications are being vetted by the group of experts, and what are the methods of verification that are being used?
So verification of building systems, it's done. First of all, the verification is done at the commissioning stage on their building permit. What the fire code requires on an ongoing basis, the big one is CFAA, Canadian Fire Alarm Association, for anybody touching your fire alarm system and doing your annuals. So CFAA certification is mandatory. And for your CAN ULCS 1001, doing the verification and doing annual fire alarm inspection, testing, maintenance with the CFA certification will cover 90% of it. But CFA certification for anything fire alarm related, that's the big one. Aside from that, it's a lot of the standards say by trained and qualified person, and then it's thereafter unenforced. It's the codes don't elaborate on what a trained or qualified person is, so we can assess it on a case by case basis. But in terms of the fire code, CFAA for fire alarm is the only requirement that's mandatory. The standards respectively say trained and qualified.
Okay, next question is, are lithium batteries rated in hazard class 9 miscellaneous?
Lithium-ion batteries are kind of in everything. So definitely they're miscellaneous, definitely. But they're also pyrophoric, they're also water reactive, they're also combustible solids. So lithium-ion batteries, yes, it's miscellaneous, amongst other things. It is an everything fire. Exposure to air, pyrophoric, you put water on it, it makes it worse. So yeah, it's something we're dealing with, but our firefighters are trained and skilled in uh, dealing with this with regards to as a hazardous materials incident.
And are these batteries in scooters or e-bikes better stored in the garage or in the condo unit?
A garage, definitely the garage. You know, if it's not in the condo unit, that's the better. Not in the public corridor, not in the public corridor, and ideally not in the unit. Although that is unfortunately largely unenforceable if it's being done properly and safely with nothing counterfeit.
Sorry, there's been a couple of questions coming up about when the session is complete. We're just going through questions now. If you do have to drop off, that's no problem. If you can't stick around for a few more minutes, we're just going to try to get through these last few questions. Okay, notices have been sent to residents about not storing items allowed in the parking spots. Can we call the authorities and have them charged for not complying?
Yes. Due diligence. Make sure you did everything in your powers to remove it yourself. And then I don't know. I have to double check whether or not a tenant can directly be charged for that. But my opinion is you can remove it yourself if it's not supposed to be there.
Sorry, there's been additional questions in the chat with respect to the presentation and the recording. The presentation will be sent to the email that you signed up with, and we will have the recording of the session posted on our website. Next question is, do we need to change the written exit sign to the new symbol signs?
No, you do not need to change the word exit and to the ISO approved running person sign that you see, the green ones. That is not retrofit. It is ongoing for new installations. If you have a multi-story building, like for this is common in office towers, if an entire floor gets renovated on their building permit, as long as anybody walking at any point in the building doesn't walk by two different kinds of exit signs, it's fine. So, for example, in a 30-story office building, let's say the 25th floor fully was underwent a building permit renovation. That floor only can have the green running person sign. The rest of the building can stay with the red exit sign. Nothing wrong with that, because when you leave that floor, you enter the stairwell and you don't walk by any other exit signs. So you have to walk by one exit sign only. That's the most important thing.
Okay, we're going to take these last three questions. And then if you do have additional questions, we'll be sure to share the chief's email so that you can reach out to him directly. Next question is, what should be done if a resident in a condo removes all of their fire and life safety devices?
No, okay. So furthermore, to the point where I mentioned that the tenant has to notify the landlord for smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. It also is in the fire code, no person shall disable a smoke alarm and no person shall disable a carbon monoxide alarm. which means they can be charged for that. It's a bit more of a gray area if they're disabling their self-closing device because it doesn't explicitly say that. So you would have to take action yourselves otherwise. But do your due diligence, keep meticulous records of these things, and call us if you need us.
Okay, if an EV car has a fire, is there a requirement to upgrade the volume of water if a fire occurs in the garage or replace water with another fire suppression system?
No, there's no requirement. So even the new building code only refers to the 2019 NFPA 13, and that's still on the old system of water. Unfortunately, the sprinkling standard is just in the 2022 edition upgraded to get 33% more water for parking garages, but that's not in effect yet. Definitely not in effect. Nothing you could do for existing buildings. Um, but I can't say for sure that it's a problem even. It's just something that's noteworthy. There hasn't been enough incidents or case studies that I've seen to say that an EV fire in a garage is going to overwhelm the sprinkler system. It potentially could, but not necessarily.
Okay, last question. If a unit owner stores an EV bike in their suite, can management force the owner to purchase an extinguisher for EV batteries?
And nothing from our end to make them do that.
Okay. Okay, we're going to wrap up questions for this session, but again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the chief directly. On behalf of CCI Toronto and area, thank you again to District Chief Harry Chilikian and Toronto Fire Services for sharing their expertise with us today. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you found this session valuable, and we look forward to seeing you at a future CCI Toronto and area event. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.